we were graced with this panel at the end of 1188. And listen, it looks painful. But this is certainly not the first time Luffy has taken a major loss in the course of an arc. Notable examples of this include him getting one shot by Kaido in early Wano, and then outright dying against him on the rooftop later on, or when Luffy lost twice to Crocodile in Alabasta. Now in both arcs, Luffy came back by the end stronger than ever and defeated them both. But I am starting to think that here on Elbaf, the solution and outcome to the arc may not be so simple. Now we are used to hitting the low point of an arc. That's pretty normal in One Piece. But in most cases, maybe with the exception of the fight against Kaido, and even not so much there in Wano overall, that low point happens earlier on. But here, in Elbaf, we haven't really reached a low point yet, and yet we are in what feels like the final fights of the arc. And Luffy, whom Oda expressed as being at full power, might as well be a kitten in the face of Imu. To the point that Imu states he is so disgustingly aware that Luffy is not Joy Boy, because Joy Boy, my Nakama, Joy Boy, would never be this weak. I can't really say that they were friends, but it kind of starting to feel like that. So can Luffy really close this gap, this chasm between now and the end of the arc? And more importantly, would that even make sense for the story? So the question for today is, what does this all mean for the end of Elbaf? Imu truly does feel like the superior, overwhelming force that one would expect from the individual who is the ruler of the world. However, he does have a few weaknesses. The first of which is the God's Knights themselves. We know from Harald's death in chapter 1171 that Imu suffered some pretty serious after effects from that happening. While we do not know exactly what these after effects are, he states that every covenant comes with a price, even for himself, even for Mu-sama. This means that no matter how powerful he may be, mobilizing the God's Knights, it comes with a risk. We see this when, after Harald's death, he blocks the Gorosei from sending anyone else, stating that another knight is just going to die if we send them to Elbaf. I do not see Sommers or Killingham being killed here on Elbaf, at least not by the Straw Hats, as Oda does not depict them doing as such. But I am convinced that they will be defeated and placed into a scenario where they are at risk of being taken out, even if that doesn't happen, which is not ideal for Imu. As for Gunko, with everything Oda has poured into her story with Brook, I have a hard time seeing her not being freed and returning to being who she really is, Princess Shuri. This would happen without her dying, of course, but there is a chance that being forcefully freed by, say, Brook and his soul powers, or if he develops Haki, will result in similar after effects on Imu. Now, to touch on some of his other hinted at weaknesses, we saw upon his arrival in Elbaf that he was damaged simply by coming to the lower realm. The Gorosei also stated that he should not be here, meaning that he surely has some sort of limitation or time limit when leaving the Holy Land. Also, while he is tremendously overpowering at close range, we saw in 1188 that his ranged attacks can be blocked by Jinbei. Now, while Jinbei is strong, and one of my favorite Straw Hats, he is not an absolute top-class fighter, meaning that for some people, combating Imu at a range is fully viable. We will go into this more as the video progresses, but I believe that these are where some of our advantages against Imu lie, and will lead towards how Oda can make sense of the outcome I'm expecting here in Elbaf, while also writing Imu as powerful as he is. They say that history repeats itself, and even the story of One Piece is not spared from this. We need to look no farther than Eustace Captain Kidd to see an example of this, through his challenging of Shanks twice, both of which ended in tremendous failure. However, I do not think this is going to be the case for the country of Elbaf. We learned from Imu that this is not the first time Elbaf has fought back in a bid to save their children. And the last time they tried, it ended in defeat. And so, I do not believe that the results will be the same here in the current era of the story. If we look at the setup of the arc, what we see is a version of Elbaf that is at its weakest, its most complacent, and learning that they should not be tossing aside their warrior ways, just as Ida told Harald so many years ago, and that they are now stepping up to the plate to reclaim their children, their country, and that warrior spirit. In short, I do not see this arc ending in them failing again. Instead, I view this as the perfect opportunity for them to fight against Imu, an enemy who has personally done them a great deal of wrong. And as we all know, they will not be alone. Now, if you like my videos, if you like hearing me yap, or the things I have to say, or listen, if you simply love my beard, I would invite you to please like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, leave a comment. All of this is super important for small channels, which mine most certainly is, and I can guarantee you that I would greatly appreciate it. Now, with that out of the way, back to your regularly scheduled programming. This would not be the first time we have seen the Straw Hats face an overwhelming force, one which none of them could single-handedly defeat. Our other shining example of this is Thriller Bark against Oars. Here, we got our first real look at the crew teaming up against an enemy, and even Luffy himself needed help from the shadows, becoming Nightmare Luffy to have a real shot at putting Oars and Moria down. Now let us look at Elbaf. From the start, in Roto's Lego City, it has featured the theme of a group fighting together to take down a god. Not only that, but Oda has written this arc in an interesting fashion in regards to the enemies. Unlike a standard arc, where there are fights laid out for most, or at least a lot of the crew, here, we only really have 3 enemies: Imu, Sommers, and Killingham. And again, this is because Shuri is set to be freed by Brook and the Straw Hats, not only from Imu's ice, but from his control as well, meaning that she may very well become an ally. And while Imu is insurmountable, his God's Knights, well, they are not. It was pointed out earlier in the arc by Skoppergaban that hockey, in general, but namely Conqueror's hockey, is something that must be mastered, controlled even, by those who wish to be the wings of the Pirate King. And through the God's Knights, Oda has given the perfect setup for both Zoro and Sanji to achieve this by learning and probably even somewhat mastering Conqueror's hockey to defeat their respective opponents. I also think that it is highly possible that, unlike past fights of theirs, say against King and Queen for example, they won't be pushed to the absolute edge, meaning that they will still be capable of fighting. And here I think we can start to see the real end of this arc take shape, with the God's Knights defeated, Imu possibly being weakened, and the whole crew plus the giants of Elbaf ready to go. I believe that we are set up for a group fight against Imu. While I believe we will drive Imu out here, I do not believe we will outright defeat him. Rather, it will be more of a stalling match for when he reaches his damage limit, his time limit, whatever that may end up being. And during this time, we will get to see instances of every character shining. When you think about it, Luffy is always putting it all on the line for his crew and for his friends. But now, the opportunity has arisen for his crew to put it all on the line for him, and for the giants to put it all on the line for their country, their children, and their friends. Characters like Dory and Bragi, or Hiruden and his crew, can get in and fight. We even have sleeper agents like Jarl, who we know was an absolute powerhouse in his younger years, here on the island with Drurly Bonnie, who can use her devil fruit power to de-age him back to that point. We may even get help from outside sources such as Shanks. With Scopper here, it would be quite cool to see a current era team up between these two monsters. We would also get to see team ups with the crew. Zoro and Sanji is always a classic one. Frankie and Jinbei would be really cool as well, especially now that Frankie's got his Super Vega Cola. Nami can channel Yonko power attacks with Zeus, and even Chopper seems to hold some sort of advantage over Imu's powers. And of course, we are all still expecting something out of Usopp in this arc. At least I think so anyway. And with Ragnar right there, wanting to protect Loki, we are staring into a near perfect matchup with those two as well. The takeaway here is that in this arc, in this fight, each Straw Hat will grow into being a member of the Pirate King caliber crew that Luffy will need going into the final arc. This, of course, will end in Luffy and Loki getting back up to tag team the final part of the fight, with Loki finally debuting his hybrid form, and Luffy possibly gaining a new power-up, greater mastery of Gear 5th, something that pushes him to the new heights needed to at least contest with Imu, which right now he cannot do. All of this to demonstrate both the future Pirate King and the country of Elbaf coming together and fighting off the threat of Imu. And because Imu is almost certainly capable of running the gauntlet, his threat as an endgame antagonist will be preserved, even if he is supplanted by, say, Blackbeard by the end of the story. To summarize, I see Elbaf ending in a tie of sorts. I can't really see Imu or the Straw Hats in Elbaf outright being defeated. Rather, I see it as being closer to a stalemate. At least that is how I feel Oda has structured the writing of this arc, and the themes it is exploring. And to me, this is the best way to portray both sides, and it also is the way I believe that Oda is going for. Of course, I am not the man, the myth, the legend. I am no Goda, so I could be way off the mark here. I ran a poll on this as well, and while the number of votes is small, just like my channel, it really feels like most people seem to think that this arc will end in a tie as well. But what do you think? Have I missed anything here? Or do you see Elbaf ending differently? I would love to hear more in the comments below. And with that, I would like each and every one of you to have an excellent rest of your day.